Good evening, Vancouver. Welcome back to Canucks After Dark, our final show here of February 2024, with the Canucks just having 22 games left on the calendar as we rapidly approach the trade deadline, and rumors are flying around Elias Pettersson. The Canucks broke the dreaded 4-game losing streak that everyone thought the sky was falling. And here to break it down with me, as always, Canuck Clay. How are you doing this week, Clay?
Parker, I'm great. Back in town from my trip to Seattle. I know we'll get into that a little bit later. That was probably the suckiest game of the 3 that we're going to recap. But overall, I'm happy that we beat the big, bad, ugly Bruins. I'm happy that you and I are back on a show together. And if you said this is the end of February, does that mean we're creeping up on our 3-year anniversary as friends, man?
We must. Yeah, we must be about, it's going to be like 6-7 shows away.
Okay, well, obviously I have it marked down on my calendar as a historic day, so we'll get to it closer. Oh, that would be a great way to start the mark of the start of the playoffs. But overall, I'm doing great, and I hope you are well as well. Anything exciting this week for you?
Not so much. I mean, a great hockey game on Saturday.
Yep.
I was riding high after that one. And it was
what
unfortunate.
Did you do? Early game. So what did you do after they won?
It sucked. So I had a hockey game at 10 p.m. that night. So it was a lot of, so my plan for the entire Saturday, I had, I think I had a late night the night before or something along those lines. And I was tired. So my plan was, okay, Canucks game will end at like 7. I'll have an hour nap before my game. Perfect. Turns out beating the Bruins with a sweet comeback and winning it in overtime, a little hard to sleep after that. I was really fired up. So I said, I'll be fine. I'll stay awake. And then at about 9 o'clock, it hit me. And we had 3 defensemen. So it was a busy night.
Did you win your game?
We tied, which is even worse. It was bad.
Okay, well, at least you made it to the game. Without you, they'd only have 2. So good job. Yeah, early game, I think for me. Oh, no, I didn't watch any of it. I caught the 3rd. And then I think I just studied for the night. Exciting life of a mature student, I guess.
Fair enough. So we got 3 games from the past week, 2 kind of clunkers, if I could say, the 3rd and 4th game of the losing streak. And the sky really felt like it was falling. And then, of course, that game against Boston. We'll go over all 3 of those. And, of course, we'll try to keep that a little condensed. I don't think we need to talk about the Avalanche game and the Kraken game all too much. And then, of course, we've got Twitter blowing up because the Canucks finally have a 2-day break. So we must panic. And everyone has to throw their opinions in the Twitter sphere, the X sphere. And, of course, we wait till we're here to do that. So we can add to the panic with all of you.
That's true. I did not see a single tweet from you nor me about what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. I keep my tweeting to the games usually.
Yeah, that's good. Smart.
All right. Well, let's start where we always start, and that is with a couple of game recaps. And we'll go back, unfortunately, to when would this have been? Was this Tuesday of last week?
Yeah, because we had a show where we broke down that 10-7 debacle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is what games 4 and 5 of the road trip that we had here before they returned home.
3 and 4. 3 and 4.
3 and 4.
Yeah,
close enough. Yeah. So last Tuesday against Colorado. This is one that I do remember this game. I think I said before the show I don't remember if I watched it. I definitely did. Because I remember being sad at the end that they couldn't get anything going. I mean, we can recap it pretty quick. I don't think the Canucks played terribly per se.
No, I think they said, that this is a decent bounce back game actually after the Minnesota loss.
I was a bit worried coming into this one, especially after that 10-7 loss, and sort of thinking, okay, they go out, Miller scores about 10 minutes in, and I'm thinking, okay, like they're looking fine, they're bouncing back, and honestly, Colorado, like the schedule doesn't get easy here, right? You have in the same week of Colorado and Boston, 2 of the top teams in the league. Not that Vancouver isn't one, but when you're trying to get out of a slump, streaks are hard to break, right? When you're winning and you're on a run, you can do things wrong and still somehow find a way to win. And the same thing kind of goes for when you're losing, right? You think it's, you can play as great as you want, but sometimes just the bounces don't feel like they're going to go your way. And that was the case here. I mean, Miller scores pretty early, and then the Canucks keep it pretty even throughout. But a couple of goals from Johansson, and then they had obviously the empty netter late. It was a pretty tight game though. It was 2-1 for the entire third period essentially.
Yeah.
They felt like they could have brought it back at some point.
Yeah, and this was, I guess, this is what you call a schedule loss because you're in Minnesota before, then you're traveling that day, no practice, obviously. You get a bit of a rest, sure, but then you're playing the high altitude of Denver, and Denver is like the second. I looked it up. We're the best team in terms of home record, fewest losses, and Colorado is second best. So you knew the Canucks were in tough, and you're right, Parker. They played him pretty good. We say it's a playoff feel. I'm not so sure, but at least they played him straight up. Miller, that first goal, beautiful pass from Besser. So Hughes to Besser, and Besser with a beautiful feed. Miller streaks in and puts it past. Uh, is it Georgiev or Georgiev? Is it hard G's or soft G's? What do you say?
A hard G to start. It's all hard G's. Georgiev.
Georgiev. Okay. So past that guy. And then you're right. Johansson. I forgot this guy still played. He had two. The one was the carom off the backboards that Demko was caught off guard. And the other one was the deflection off of Ian Cole's glove. So yeah, you can't blame Demko on the second one. First one was a tricky play. We scored those and then empty netter. So yeah, there wasn't a lot. You're right. There wasn't a lot to choose from. The shots were basically even, penalties even. So it's just a battle of two good teams. It wasn't like Hughes or McCarr dominated the other one either. So we can put that narrative to bed for at least one game. So overall, it just kind of stunk because it was like the third loss, and then you're like, oh, that's the first 3-game losing streak of the season, even though the Canucks were the last team in the entire league to suffer 3 straight losses.
Yeah, and analytically in this game, the Canucks were pretty decent, right?
Yep.
Especially at 5-on-5. 5-on-5 expected goals were pretty much even. Canucks were, they were behind in the second, obviously, but they were the better team in the third at 5-on-5. Shot attempts were 15-8, but actual shots were only 6-5. So, just not hitting the net. That really felt like a theme, especially in the Boston game. I noticed it was like, there were so many times where they had what felt like a grade A+ chance and they would miss the net, or they'd hit the post, or they'd wind up for a clapper on a wide open net, Philip Hronik. And it just felt like, again, like I mentioned, like when things aren't going your way, it's impossible to get things to go your way. And it felt like that in this one too.
Yeah. So overall, yeah, if it was any other team, or if it wasn't a top 5 team in the league, I think I would be a little bit more distressed. It started to feel like it was piling on, but everything looked good. Heading into Seattle, a team that we should beat handily, like we did the last time that we were in Seattle.
Yeah, and then you make the long trip down across the border to sit right behind the Canucks bench, best seats in the house. And how do the Canucks repay you but with really an abysmal performance? Like this was one of their worst games of the year, I think. Shots 31-21, which again against a Seattle team, that's not acceptable, right? Like they're fine, they're okay. They're not a team that should be, dominating you at 5-on-5, right?
No.
High danger chances were 8-5 for Seattle in this game. Expected goals were essentially 2-1 in this game. You take into account all situations, they go from expected goals to 3.1 for Seattle to 1.5 for Vancouver. So truly a double up. 68% of the expected goals going to Seattle. Yeah, like there was no excuse for this one. The Canucks just looked bad.
Yeah, and Rick Tocchet was mad, Parker, after the game. He talked about 4 or 5 guys who've been no showing for 4 or 5 straight games. He couldn't say the word B. Well, neither can I. We tried that Manscaped ad 2 years ago. BALLS. He couldn't say it. He spelled it out, which is kind of funny. He just said the team didn't play with any guts, basically. And yeah, and I talked to my own show about all the cool things about sitting behind the bench, and my son Sean got an Elias Lindholm stick, which is pretty cool. But yeah, to want to cheer so badly, despite all those cool things, for a Canucks win. And you're right, it was probably the worst, at least analytically, is I think the worst, one of the worst performances of the season. Horrible, absolutely horrible.
Yeah. It was bad, and there weren't many redeeming factors, right? They get out of the first tied, which is great, and Miller continues to score, which is nice for him, but again they give it up, and then these early goals, right? We've seen it over the road trip, the goals early in the first period. This one, that sort of backbreaker early in the second, right? That Jared McCann goal just took all the wind out of their sails. Lafferty gets one back, but then Seattle scores too late. Later in the second. And I mean, like the effort in the third period, right? You're down 2 going into the third against a Seattle team that you should be a lot better than. right?
Yeah.
That should be, you look at you go back to like the 2011 team, for example, right? How many times did they sort of play with their food, right? They were like, we're down, or we're tied 1-1 after two, or we're like down 2-1 after two. Just go pot two quickly and move on to the next one, right? Like that was something that they had the ability to do. And this team has the ability to do as well. Like they have the skill level, but going into a third period down 4-2, and then you look at like from an analytical perspective, high danger chances 4-1. You had one high danger chance in the entire third period when you're down 2 goals, right? 9 shots, sure, that's nice, but you look at the heat map on where they're coming from, and it's from the right face-off circle and from the left point where Quinn Hughes stands. That's about it, right? Or I guess part of the time. And then you look at the expected goals coming from that. 1.57 for Seattle, 0.45 for Vancouver. By far the most lopsided of the 3 periods. That's it. There's just no excuse for that, right? I mean, going down 2 goals to a team that you should beat, 7 times out of 10, let's say.
I agree. And Demko letting in uncharacteristic goals. The one-timer from Vince Dunn from the blue line, the shot from Justin Schultz from the blue line, like those are goals. And then McCann, Eberle, those were tricky ones where I think the D didn't help him out. But it was and the special teams, Seattle 1 for 3, we were 0 for 4. Just there was nothing good about our game that night except for the start, and that was it.
So where was your panic index after this one?
That's a really good question. The Canucks were the last team to get to a 3-game losing streak, as I mentioned. Then I didn't do the math on were they the last team to get to 4, if there's any other team. My panic index was, so I got to be careful because I know we're going to talk about the Boston game with great glee in a couple minutes. So if I'm trying to be as even keeled as I can, I was upset about the time, money, energy I spent. Quite frankly, I think that's a natural, human reaction. But for the team itself, I was a little bit scared. Panic, no, but I was a little bit scared because I knew if we lost to Boston, which could be very conceivable, they're just as good as us, that there would be a lot of panic in the city itself, and the narrative would be brutal with these 2 days in between games, as we talked about. So I was a little bit panicked, more scared, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And I think I was just in a frustrated boat. Like, after each of these games, I would just sort of turn them off, and I wouldn't be like, oh, we need to change this, and this. Because in the back of my mind, like, I'm still like, hey, we're still first in the league, or at one point, I guess they were 5th by points percentage. Oh no, right? You're still first in the Pacific. You're doing fine. So I was never like panicking, because really, I mean, the wheels can really fall off, and this team will finish 2nd in the Pacific. Like,
yes, exactly.
They're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to, they're going to be at home most likely in the first round. There's not too much to panic about. And then I think I started coping a bit. I was like, yeah, well, if you're going to face adversity, you want to face it now. Look at Boston last year. They faced no adversity. They get to the first round, then they fold, right? Yeah. And I think and I saw a bit of that around as well, like on Twitter and things like that. And now I look back on, I was coping, right? Like, but also I wasn't thinking like, we need to go out and make some moves. Oh, the Lindholm deal was terrible. Oh, we got it. Like, oh, we're really going to pay this Pettersson guy $12 million with the way he's playing right now. I just sort of looked at it and I was like, I'm just going to not think about it. Yeah. And I think that was healthy of me. Well, I just sort of turned the games off, and I was like, all right, on to the next thing. I'm just not going to, let's sort of follow the Rick Tocchet approach, right? Let's not get too low. Let's not get too high. Although I did break that rule on Saturday. Let's just see what happens.
So Parker, I got 22, 23 years on you, but I can still learn from you. And maybe it's because I had to make a 3-hour drive up the next day with my son and 2 buddies. And that's all we talked about, right? Is why.
Oh, if I was in your boat, I would have been mad. I mean, I went to the Seahawks 49ers game on Thanksgiving, and it was just a stomp, right? And I was like, wow, we paid a lot of money to be here. Right? At least the Canucks won the next night, so we had that redeeming factor.
Right.
Which you were not lucky enough for.
So, but first world problems. We got to sit behind the bench, and I missed the carpool cut off, so I was stuck in 20 more minutes of traffic trying to get home on Friday. So I was a little bit grumpy, but overall, overall, we were very blessed to be there and to have that experience. And I'll just tell you, I won't bore you with stories, but the one cool story, Parker, I mentioned this on my stream. You might not have seen it. Is when the coaches are looking down at their feet, right, and they're looking at monitors that are underneath the ground, as you know, and so they're standing on it and they're looking through a see-through thing. What the video coach is doing, you see the video coach, going zooming in, zooming out, rewind, fast forward, but then at the very end, the video coach will type "good goal" in green letters. So that's what the Rick Tocchet sees. So he knows not to challenge. It's really cool. So it's not Tocchet making the decision. He's basically taking the cue. But I physically got to see in big block letters on the monitor, "good goal," and basically means don't challenge. It's kind of cool.
That is a cool peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, it is.
I thought maybe they had like a little earpiece, but then I know they don't.
Yeah.
That's smart.
He's basically just running off of what the video coach says. Hey, before we forget, and because we want to acknowledge this, Carol coming through with 5 memberships. It was a little bit earlier, so I didn't get to see who they went to, but whoever they went to, welcome to Canucks After Dark membership. And thank you, Carol, for your generosity as always.
Thank you very much,
awesome.
Carol.
Yeah, give some love to Carol in the chat.
Mm-hmm. With that, let's go to the big game. Hockey Night in Canada, 4 p.m. early start. Which I like. Honestly, there's a lot of like, oh, we're accommodating Boston and Toronto with these early games. But honestly, it's kind of nice, especially after a win, because you don't have to, you can sort of dwell on it for a while. But after a win, it's like 7:00 and it's like, oh, I'm going to maybe have dinner. Or like for me, it was like, oh, I'm going to, relax before my hockey game. And it was nice because in the dressing room, we were just all talking about the game, which was fun.
Yeah.
Honestly, a really, really big turnaround compared to that Seattle game. The Canucks, you have one of the best teams in the league for a couple of years now, the Boston Bruins, who just won't seem to go away. And they come out and the Canucks get some adversity, right? I mean, the first period, I think first period was pretty even. A lot of back and forth, nothing, obviously no goals, but I don't think there was anything, any big discrepancy between the two teams. And I'm curious analytically, it's about, 54-46, right? Basically even. Shots were even. Everything was, pardon me?
For Boston, though.
Yeah. So a slight edge, but everything was pretty even in the first. Second period, though, again, Canucks outshoot Boston. Analytically, the Canucks are technically the worst team because of some high danger chances. But Boston gets those 2 goals. They get a Boquist goal and the Heinen goal. And I don't have the highlights in front of me. If you can remember these in any sense.
I do. The Boquist was from Brazil. That was the one where it was the neutral zone face-off. And remember, Hronek got beat, so it became a 2-on-1 with Hughes. Hughes trying to check Brazil, and then he turned his back, and then I think he thought Hronek was further back, but Hronek wasn't. So Hronek was basically left in the dust in the neutral zone, and then Boquist made a nice deke on Demko, putting it past his pad. I remember
that was the bad pinch from Hronek on the offside face-off, right?
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
So that's tough. And then then you have the Heinen goal. So So 2-0 Boston after 2, and this feels like Jeremy Swayman is just going to steal this game. Like, he played so unbelievably well. There was just glove save after glove save. Stop shooting that side. Like, after a while, learn that you're not scoring on the glove side. He was absolutely phenomenal, and it was so frustrating, honestly, to watch.
Did you at all think of the All-Star thing of Swayman and Demko, or are you past that?
Yeah, I mentioned that even in the house. I was like, this is karma. I was just frustrated.
It's good goalie.
So we go to the third, and instead of folding, being like, we've lost 4 in a row, here we go again. The Canucks come out and they are like, they're firing. Honestly, you look at some of the numbers in this period. Obviously, shots were 17-5 in favor of Vancouver in the third. Scoring chances 16-6. High danger chances 6-2. Corsi shot attempts 39-12.
What?
So the Canucks dominated the shot share, and the entire third period was in Boston's zone. Boston basically did what the Canucks have done all year, right? They said, oh, we got a 2-goal lead going to the third. We never lose when that happens. Let's just sit back. However, Boston has been losing when they've been doing that every game lately. They've been blowing leads in the third period and losing in overtime. And so for them, I'm sure they felt a lot of deja vu. But it starts, and again, save after save for Jeremy Swayman. And finally, the Canucks break through with about 7 minutes left. This one's a face-off win back by Miller. And it's a really, really nice pass. Who made that pass?
Zadorov. Yeah.
What a game for Zadorov, by the way. Yeah. Zadorov fires it across to Besser. And Besser has to take this on his offhand with a defender closing. And in one motion, just pulls it, 6 inches over. So it's a little bit more in his feet and somehow gets a perfect shot off.
Yeah. Did you hear the narrative after the game? JT Miller said that it was something they pre-scouted against Boston about the way they positioned there on a defensive zone faceoff, but then he stopped because he said, well, I don't want to give away. And Zadorov in his thing basically just said, JT Miller noticed that their defenseman was really far back. And so we had plenty of time. Like, it was so funny. And that's what they did. That's what they did. They recognized that it was Forbert, who was basically on the far side and had to get all the way over to Besser. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and if you draw that up on the face-off, you say, hey, look, Besser, I'm winning this back, 60% of the time. You just take 2 strides backwards, right? Yep. And you've got space, and that's exactly what he did. And Zadorov finds him. Probably wanted the pass to be a little bit more in the wheelhouse. But man, that's such an impressive shot. Just watching that in real time to get it on the wrong foot, pull it back, and you're expecting you're just trying to get the shot off before the goalie gets there. I'm expecting this thing to be chest height, maybe inside the post, maybe wide. Yep. To put it perfectly under the bar was very impressive.
And Parker, later when you have time, go back and watch the replay. I don't know if you remember this. Jules said, I don't know if this was part of the play or if he just really wanted the puck. You see him standing there with a stick like this.
Yeah. I just watched it and I saw that. And that's why I was confused on who made the pass because I didn't remember fully. Yeah, maybe I don't know if that's part of the set play or maybe he wanted the 1T. Yeah,
because Zadorov didn't look at him at all. So
no.
Yeah.
So the Canucks again keep firing. Pull the goalie with about 2 minutes to go, and they get set up, which is nice because I feel like there's so many times. At least it's probably confirmation bias, but it feels like a lot of the times you pull the goalie and we immediately give the puck away and they score, right? Yeah. And that's just heartbreaking. But the Canucks get set up. It's a pass back to Hronek. Hronek just drives it, and it's a great shot. And again, Brock Besser gets all the credit here. Yes. That screen that he sets up, and I don't know if this clip that I have shows the angle. It does. The angle of Besser going from Swayman, if you are Swayman's left shoulder right across as Hronek winds up. And if you look at the point of release for Philip Hronek's shot, you cannot see Jeremy Swayman. You just can't. You only see Brock Besser, and you see the pads of Swayman sticking out like Besser has 4 legs. It's a perfect screen. It's a well enough place. I mean, it's a perfectly placed shot, really. It could be a little higher, but it's glove height inside the post. It's right as Swayman puts his glove down because he can't see. It's a perfect play. And I just, again, so much credit to Besser on that. He doesn't get an assist for it, but he's been so good in front of the net.
Yeah, well said. 2 things I want to point out. No, this isn't the overtime goal. Never mind. One thing I want to point out. Did you see the angle from behind Hronek, the one ice level? It reminds me so much of the stanchion goal. Remember when Bieksa scored? Yeah. And of course, it's a little bit different. This one, you got Besser in front of the net, as you explained so well. Whereas the stanchion goal, no one was in front of the net because everyone was on the boards trying to find the puck. But it was the same angle, same feel. Not the same, of course, circumstances, but still very nice to see that angle where you can see what Hronek's doing and you see what Besser's doing the entire time. Yeah. It's really cool.
That's the angle I was just talking about. That perfect screen. You see it and Swayman just disappears.
Yeah.
Which is perfect. Which forces overtime and everyone's buzzing, but it's overtime. Who knows what happens. And the Canucks get possession. I don't think they didn't start with possession, did they?
Nope, they didn't.
Boston got possession and then they gave it up. Didn't get a shot attempt, didn't do anything with it. And the Canucks set up, or no, they get the power play because of the bad change in overtime.
Yes.
Which Pettersson saw, right? Like he fired it right to the guy getting off the bench, and it was Marchand coming off, and he just was skating really slowly up the wall.
Correct. Frederick came on, and Marchand was going on, or something like that.
Yeah. So Pettersson fired it right at him, and it had his hands up before the guy even touched the puck, so he knew what he was doing. Canucks go to the power play. They get set up, and they put JT Miller skating downhill in the left face-off circle, which has been my favorite play that they've had this year because of the options it gives, especially at 4-on-3 in overtime, right? You look at the options that Miller has, right? He can obviously shoot, right? He can go for the net front tip, which he did, but he also can go just, regroup back to Hughes and then recycle. And then Hughes has the, all three options as well. Or he can go across to Pettersson, especially with less bodies out there than a normal power play for the one-timer. So it's how do you defend that? Like genuinely, that's impossible.
You can't. And I know one of the talk shows was talking about that 5-on-4 and a diamond. Typically the right point of the diamond is right where JT Miller wants to go. 4-on-3, it's a triangle. There's no one out there. And that's why you can't defend it. It was really good. Really good.
And the defender, the lone defender back, he's sort of playing double duty, right?
Yeah.
If that puck goes to Pettersson, he needs to get in that shooting lane right away. But if that puck comes to Besser, he needs to turn around and lift the stick.
Yeah.
And you can't really do both with how quickly that play developed.
So Parker, what do you do when you're watching it live and they score? Are you swearing? Are you motioning towards the TV? Are you running around? Like, what do you actually do?
So I was standing to start. I was standing about 3 feet from a big TV, which is probably not good for my eyes or something. It's usually, it's a big fist bump.
Yeah.
And, a hell yeah, that's about it. It's, I was fired up though. I was fired up, especially basically after Besser scored that first goal, in the third. I was on my feet the rest of the way.
Yeah, this isn't probably the most becoming of a 49-year-old church man, but I think I yelled, "Suck it, suck it, suck it, suck it," like a few times.
I respect it. That is so fair.
Yeah, I was pretty excited.
Yeah, I was fired up.
Me too. But I didn't have a hockey game to play 3 hours later, so.
Yeah, that was it did ruin my nap.
Before we get off the game, I know a lot of people talk about it. I know Sully and Force has been making the media rounds today. Really, he's actually very articulate. I was watching some of his interviews. Green Men, do you remember them from back in the day?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
They were
that's pretty cool. Yeah,
I love the way that they did it too, like bringing them out the commercial break when the Boston had a guy in the box. Actually, it was the only guy they had in the box. That wasn't very convenient.
Right.
But you could see, I think it was Frederick in the box, and he's just like can't help but smile a little bit. That was very good.
Van Riemsdyk, James JVR. Yeah. But you're right. And I know in the interviews they were saying there actually weren't a lot of power plays. There weren't a lot of goals. So they were worried that they wouldn't have a lot of time to do some of their shtick, right? But of course, as the game went on, especially at the end of the game, they had a lot to celebrate. So very cool. And it'd been cool. Maybe you and I should do that. Become the blue. No, okay, maybe not.
No, it's gonna be tough.
Be. you might look okay in that stuff. I think I'm a little bit. I got to do some work.
I'd have some work to do. That was great, and I think that's the time that they should come out of retirement is like when the team is really good. I don't want them out there when this team is third in the Pacific and playing Vegas round one and due to get stomped in 5. But if they're going in as like favorites to win a round or two, perfect. That's where the fun comes from.
Yep. I'm with you. So overall, a great night. And it's just so much better. Even if they lost 2-0 or 2-1 and they played well, at least there's some solace. But the fact that it's the actual end of a streak. So I'll ask you one last question, Parker, and then we'll move on to forward looking because we're at the halfway point. I was talking on my show last night. Do you, as much as we say, don't get too high with the highs, too low with the lows, do you put any more stock into Saturday night's game because it's either A, the Bruins, B, it snaps the streak, or C, the way that we came back to win, or maybe a combination of all three?
It's all the above. Maybe logically it shouldn't be like from a pure logic perspective, like breaking the streak is good. I think really the big thing is the way they played against the top team, right?
Yeah.
With all this narrative around like, oh, the Canucks can't beat top teams, even though statistically it's just so wrong. It's ridiculous. Like they're one of the best teams against top 10 teams by points percentage in the league. So like that's a silly argument to make, but it's a bit of confirmation bias, right? We've seen it happen a bit lately. We've seen them blown some leads recently. So it's happened a couple times and it feels bad.
Yep.
So realistically, that's the only part that should matter, but it feels so much better that it's Boston. It feels so much better that it was a comeback and to end the slump, right? Like
Yeah.
if they had gone out the way they played, maybe they deserved to win this game just 4-2 flat out, never, have the lead early and never lose it. And that would have been great. But this one just, the lows of this game really made the highs feel even better.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. Well said. So you're happy. I'm happy. Everyone's happy. So then of course we can focus on other things than a losing streak over the past little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was fun. Fun day. But of course, Canucks fandom, we haven't had, a 2-day break in weeks.
Yeah,
really,
doesn't feel
right?
like it. Yeah,
It's since the All-Star break, right? So, there's no game tonight and they didn't play yesterday. Everyone gets a little bit antsy and they don't have, the Penguins aren't till tomorrow. Don't have to worry about that. Let's all panic about Elias Pettersson's contract because Elliot Friedman talked about it. Maybe you want to recap what he said on Saturday?
Yeah, so Elliot Friedman basically on one of his intermission pieces saying that he understands that teams have been starting to call on Elias Pettersson, basically asking Patrick Allvin, what's going on? Obviously, he's not signed yet. Do you plan to sign him? Would you have any interest in trading him? You guys, everyone out there, this doesn't mean the Canucks are trading Elias Pettersson. And I know we're going to talk about this, Parker, but I think it's common knowledge that if you're a good general manager and you see the situation happening, you should make a call. There's no harm in making a call because who knows what you're going to unearth? Who knows if maybe things don't work out a year down the road, which I hope isn't the case, that Alvin's going to remember that he had this great conversation with this GM from an Eastern Conference team. So there's so many reasons why you should make that call, but that's what Friedman said. And that coupled with a story about 96 million, 8 times 12 that Pettersson's group just has sitting on the table. Those two stories from a national media perspective got the ball rolling. Then, of course, today is the Donnies and Dollies and Sakaris and Prices talking about not only should Pettersson be signed by now, why isn't he? And then other fans then jumping on it saying, well, local media, you're feeding into this when there's no story here. So that's basically what we're going to try and stick a fork in for the next few minutes here.
Yeah. This one's funny to me because in my eyes, absolutely nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Right.
Preach, brother. Preach.
So we had at the beginning of the season, Elias Pettersson said, I'm going to wait till the end of the season. I'm not going to worry about it now. Now, should that change? Maybe if there's a $96 million offer in front of you, maybe. But he also did say, I'm going to wait till the end of the season. Now, you then have Allvin going on record a bunch of times, really. And I think Rutherford a couple times too. And basically every time it comes up, there's like, we're trying to sign him. And it sounds very passive. Like it sounds like they're in a position of weakness. Like, oh, we're trying, like we're doing our best. But I think that's just the way Allvin talks. I don't think he's actually he's like, oh, we're doing our best, guys. Like, I really hope we can sign him. He's like, yeah, we're trying, we're doing our due diligence. And Pettersson's side is doing what they want to do, which is wait until the end of the season. Mm-hmm. And then you have, obviously the Friedman saying teams are calling. Yeah, of course teams are calling, right? You look back on like Sebastian Aho back a few years ago when he was an RFA, that didn't look like he was going to get signed and the whole offer sheet thing happened. But you'd be like, it's due diligence that your team should be calling. Now, I don't know if our GM at the time was doing that because maybe he wasn't the most competent. But it's of course teams are calling. And of course, maybe those teams are going to, drop a hint to a guy like Elliot Friedman to drive out the pressure a little bit because that only benefits them, right? If they say, hey, we called the Canucks, we're trying to get Elias Pettersson, right? Now Friedman can say that on Hockey Night in Canada and stir up some drama, right? And maybe sow some discourse and yada, yada, yada. And everything Pettersson said is, I want to play for a winning team, which he now is. I want to get paid, which the Canucks can do. Look, if he doesn't want to play for this team, not really a problem right now. Genuinely, right? Like that is an off-season problem, because the Canucks own his rights through next year. If he genuinely is wanting to get traded, it would really suck. But I think we have a bunch of like coincidental evidence and not much actual like consequential evidence.
Right, right. Oh man, there's so many angles to take, Parker. So I don't blame the fans for talking about this. I don't blame the media for talking about this. So but I also don't blame people for saying I'm sick of it already, because isn't this to be a non-story? A great example is my season ticket partner Mike, who knows a lot about hockey. He is much more concerned that PD isn't going to resign here than I am. Do I want PD to resign here? Yes. Do I think he will? Yes. Would I be upset if he doesn't? Yes. But would I think we'd be okay? Yes, because I actually trust Alvin and Rutherford, and I'm not going down that road yet. What I will say is, you kind of hinted at this too, Alvin. Yeah, in the way that they're passive and quiet, it's almost like they have this quiet confidence to them. They don't let things leak, and if they do, they get on it right away. We didn't know about the Lindholm thing until basically 2 hours before it was going to happen. So I just have a feeling that they know exactly where they stand. They know exactly where PD's people stand, and we don't. Media doesn't, and that's why there's so much furor and so much consternation. But maybe these two sides know exactly where they are, and they've just agreed not to talk about it in the media. That's obviously maybe Wonderland and best case scenario, but that's maybe I'm being ignorant, Parker. But I don't worry about it. I just don't.
Yeah, I'd be a lot more worried under the previous management group. Because I'd be really worried about anything that would happen would be negative. Currently, and look, usually when you trade the best player, the team that trades the best player in a trade usually loses the trade. It's the way it goes, because usually you're getting a bundle of things in return, and it's sort of tough to add things up to a star player, right? You can get a bunch of guys who are going to contribute and get you a couple wins above replacement every year. But you can also get those guys for free for nothing in free agency most of the time.
Yeah.
So that doesn't really add up, right? First round picks, this team's not in a position for those to matter unless you're turning around and flipping them. And I would say, like, really, I think the best case, let's say Pettersson does want to get traded and doesn't want to play here and doesn't want to sign here. I think their best bet would be to try to do what Calgary and Florida did, right? With the Tkachuk for Huberdeau deal. Now, that worked abysmally for the Calgary Flames. And there's obviously the potential for that to happen. But again, everything that we've seen this management group do has been successful.
Yeah.
Everything. Yep. They haven't really had a miss yet. And any of their misses have been very minor, but they've also made some minor good moves to make up for it, right? We can look back and like, oh, do you want to nitpick the Sam Lafferty trade because he started the season really well and hasn't been playing well lately? I don't. He was we got a fifth for him, and he helped us win a bunch of games early, right? Yeah. There's really nothing that this management group has done to make me nervous. And I think that in the unlikely case that they need to move Elias Pettersson, they'll get the most value possible.
Two questions for you, Parker. One of the, are you, as a fan, are you at all offended? That's probably the wrong word, but offended, upset that PD hasn't said more, done more about staying? Number one. And number two, do you think PD shies away, thrives in, or is neutral about how hockey, how rabid this fan base is?
I don't think I'll answer the second question first. I don't think that's, I don't see that as a problem for him.
Yeah.
I think he just has a very sort of stoic demeanor and a little bit confrontational demeanor with the media. And he's always had that, but I think he's going to have that in 75% of the markets he played in. Right. I guess, he could go to, Tampa or, Sunrise and it'll be quieter, or you go to Carolina or Phoenix or whatever, right? But I also think he'd, I don't think that would be exciting for him. Not that I'm speaking for him, but I don't know. He seems very competitive, right? Yes, and I don't think he'd want to go to a place where that competitiveness didn't really matter. And But am I like offended or anything? No, I mean, he has the right to negotiate the way he wants to negotiate. Look, if in his heart of hearts he doesn't want to play here, that sucks. But I'm not going to be offended by it, right? I'm not going to have a John Tavares situation. Like, it's his right, right? He's hockey's sort of a weird thing. Sports are a weird thing, where you just get drafted and you have to play for this one team. You can't go and work anywhere else. It's a weird system that, when players put their time in and they earn the right to, to choose where they want to go. Look, if he doesn't want to play here, he doesn't want to play here. Yeah. But I don't think he's ever really indicated that, except when he said, I don't want to play for a losing team. And,
right.
Well, the Canucks were a losing team back then.
No, it's funny. Just so everyone knows, a little peek behind the curtain, Parker and I, we try not to talk about these topics before we go live because we want it to be spontaneous, and we don't want, if I knew what Parker was going to say and vice versa, it kind of just naturally biases. So Parker and I, before we even press record, we said, okay, we're going to talk about this. This should be fun, blah, blah, blah. But having said that, Parker, at the risk of making this a little bit more boring, I agree with everything you say. And I'm not just setting myself up for, if he gets traded, then I can say, oh, it's no big deal. No, I truly think that when he was on that boat with Elliot Friedman in Sweden in the summer, when he says, I'm not going to worry about this, I'm not going to entertain resigning until the end of the season, nothing that he said or done has wavered from that commitment. So I don't get why there's this freaking out, this consternation, and maybe I'm missing something. But if he's to his word and the Canucks want to honor that word to not make him mad, then this is exactly how I thought it was going to go. Truly. Very truly.
Yeah. Yeah. And people concerned on like the media perspective, right? Where they're like, oh, the media is going to drive them away. The media is a big part of why this market is so interesting, right? Like the media is the way they are because of the way the fan base is, right? And this is the way it is for every big market team in any sport, right? You look at the NFL right now, right? We're sort of in that early off-season limbo, pre-draft. Players are getting cut, players are getting franchise tagged in the NFL, right? All of these teams that have, star players where their futures are up in the air, that's all they're talking about, right? Because it's the most important thing going on with the team at that moment. Elias Pettersson's contract situation on days off is the most important thing going on with this team, right?
Right.
And, are the media, maybe being a little bit sensationalist for clicks? Sure, right? But it's their jobs to do so. We're in a world where, the media landscape is so fragile that, they're doing what they can to get the clicks, to get the ad revenue to survive.
Yeah.
So I'm not too concerned about that. Do I worry that like, Pettersson sees that and is like, oh wow, these guys suck because they're prying in, and I told them I wasn't going to worry about this season. Maybe, but also I think he probably just closes Twitter and it's not a problem anymore. It's not a bad problem to have, really, in the grand scheme of things. You're winning. You're about to get paid $100 million essentially before you convert it to the city you're living in's currency. I think he's going to be okay. And I think his, a lot of these people tweeting and stuff, like he's had real conversations with them. Like they've been in the dressing room, they've had conversations. I'm sure there's some mutual respect there, right? I'm sure that he's not looking at a lot of these guys and be like, oh, this guy again, right? I'm sure there's a couple, but I think for the most part, most of our, Vancouver's media are pretty decent people for the most part.
Right. Okay. So again, agree with everything you said. And it's funny that you mentioned the fact that does he see this? Cause I was going to ask you about that. Cause I'm sure he's not oblivious. So here's one last thought, and then we can get to people for the last 15 minutes with PD then. Oh shoot, I just lost my thought. It was such a good thought too. And I set it up so well. I guess not so well. It was going to be a point about, oh, this is horrible. Stall for me for 30 seconds.
Okay. Do you want me to just put a new topic in your head to really throw you off?
Yeah, sure. Do that.
Brandon Duheim.
About Minnesota, right?
Yes. Tweeted out by Frank Saravalli earlier today, this morning. Quote, mentioned this today on today's DFL Rundown pod, but worth a tweet. Canucks have been keeping close tabs on Minnesota Wild's Brandon Duhaime. It's no lock Duhaime's move with Minnesota in a playoff chase, but an intriguing piece on our trade targets board. We are talking about a player who has played 58 games, has 64 penalty minutes, is a -8, and has 6 points this season.
And we need him
also
because
born
why?
one day before me.
Oh, wow, okay. And we need him because why? What is he? He's obviously a grit grinder. Like,
I guess I have no idea. He makes $1.1 million. He's
Okay.
he's a UFA at the end of this season.
Yeah.
I have no idea. 44% Corsi when he's on the ice. I don't see any value here.
Okay, well, I'm going to look this guy up later just to find out when your birthday is again. So I I remember what I was going to say really quickly about the media. I think you and I both respect the job they do. You're right. They do clicks once in a while, depending on who it is. Some are more clicky than others. Do you think, though, in this case, Parker, with Elliot Friedman talking about it, Dollywall talking about it, others, is in this case, is there a bit of where there's smoke, there's fire at all? Like, do you at all believe that maybe, even for an instance, that PD might not be happy here?
Yeah.
You believe it?
Yeah. I bet. Because that's, there's a reason that's a saying.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there's also a lot of, when there's a little smoke, a lot of people make smoke. Right. I know that's maybe not as
we are in Vancouver. That's true. Yes.
Or coherent, but,
Yeah.
I think, there was a little bit of smoke with what Elliot Friedman said. Right. And then everyone said, ooh, this is something we need to jump on and get our takes in.
Right. That's fair.
I think, look, if these were a bunch of different sources saying similar things, that's smoke to me. But one guy saying, there's been some calls, isn't a lot of smoke.
Okay. That's fair. So we're talking about campfire versus cigarette. I hear you.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, Brandon Duhaime, I imagine this would just be like a depth addition for the playoffs, right?
Okay.
I'm sure we are talking cheap acquisition. Like, it's gotta be, right? Like, heavy, he's 6'2", 200. He's, he's a bit of a bigger guy. He's very physical, obviously. He has 228 career penalty minutes in 189 games. He gets involved, right? And I could see that being like, oh, we need a spark in the lineup for one game in the playoffs, or a guy's injured and we need to slot someone in. This team needs more depth, right? Baines has been a great bit of depth, and that's maybe one of the topics we can get to, because I don't think we've talked about him at all.
Well, yeah.
But again, it's what's your depth, right? It's Phil Giuseppe, it's Niels Aman, it's Linus Karlsson, and it's Archibald Baines.
Yeah.
Maybe you want a guy who's played 200 games to fill in once in a while.
Yeah. Kai might know more than us. Honestly, he's a tough kid and pretty good in the PK, but that's about it. LOL. I can see why the Canucks would rather have him in the lineup than Niels Aman, your buddy, during playoff time.
and especially if the Canucks are going with this 4-center look that we saw on Saturday, right? Just running Pettersson, Miller, Lindholm, Bluger down the middle. That makes Niels Aman pretty expendable, as he's essentially prototypical fourth line center, and allows you to put in a winger instead, right? Like a Baines, like a Phil Giuseppe, or like a Brandon Duhaime. Injuries are going to happen, especially as we get into playoffs. It's a 2-month grind. So yeah, more bodies, the better. Especially, look, he wouldn't have any impact on the cap. I think that's essentially entirely buriable. And he's an extra body.
Sure. All right, 2 minutes on Baines, and then we'll get to the people. What do you think so far?
He's a little, he's good. I mean, I think the one downside, I think, is his foot speed. He hasn't looked very quick, but he's looked very tenacious.
Yes.
Which I think most people will in their first set of NHL games, but I think that's a vibe that he's brought from Abbotsford. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that going away. Almost had a really nice goal against Boston. A really nice scoring chance that came out of nowhere. He's got some skill, and again, similar to Niels Aman and my piece on him, right? It's a hard guy to bet against, right? When at every single level, he's, didn't get drafted ever, right? Not even in junior. right? How many guys don't play junior hockey or don't get drafted into the WHL because they're not good enough at 14, 15 years old? How many of them get to that level a few years later to be playing NHL minutes? Guys who grind, right?
Yeah.
And to go unsigned and to be playing NHL games is a feat in itself. But I think he's going to keep trying to get better because that's all he's ever done. But I've been impressed. I think he hasn't looked out of place.
Tenacious is a good way to put it. He's responsible. He's not afraid to get to the dirty areas. Not afraid to, he's taken a couple penalties, or at least one that I can remember. So he's not afraid to get in there. And I know, and it sounds like Rick Tocchet really likes him. He basically said that he could see him being in the lineup for the rest of the season, and then he quickly walked that back and said, "Well, it depends on who else is in the lineup." But yeah, I think Tocchet really likes him, so that's a great sign for Baines. It's good. I actually met his cousin in Seattle. A bunch of them, his family, made the trip down to see him. And unfortunately, that was a bad game for all of us to watch. But it was cool to meet one of his family members. They're obviously so proud and every right to be. Yeah,
yeah,
very
and
cool.
Look, analytically, his first game he was abysmal. Like if you there was that like impact game score graph, and he was so far at the bottom, and everyone was like, "Nah, no, he was good. Just ignore that. He was out there for a couple goals against. Don't worry about it."
Right.
And that was nice to see. People, no one like sort of grabbed that and were like, "Oh, who let this guy in the lineup?" Right? No, he genuinely looked decent. And that's again a nice piece to have, just as a spark that you can add where you need to. Also, like this week, JT Miller's been an absolute monster. And I mean, Nikita Zadorov against Boston, like kind of took over that game a little bit.
Yes.
Like that I don't think I was expecting.
Yep. When he obviously his size, that's the first thing you notice, but when he can skate really well for a big guy, he was outstanding. His best game of the year, I think.
Yeah, that improved my opinion on him quite a bit. That was really cool. And I think that again, if we get that Zadorov for the playoffs, that's again a really nice addition.
Love it. Should we go to the Peeps for the last 10 minutes?
Sure, let's do it, folks. I know you guys have been chatting consistently, and we really appreciate that. It's good to see the passion in here. Sorry, that's stealing from the Maple Leafs. I'll never say that again. So, folks, if you got any questions, Q&A, we've talked about everything we can think of over the 50 minutes. So it's time for you folks to fire in your questions. Let us know, your thoughts over the last week, or any questions that you want us to talk about. We'll start with Eli asking Kuzmenko on the fourth line thoughts. I think he was actually in the scratch spot in practice today.
And then I know he didn't play last game, but that's because he was sick, not because he's healthy scratch. But I've seen his minutes go from 18 to 16 to 14 to 12 to 10. Maybe, I don't wish ill will on him, but I'm not surprised, actually, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, based on the way he's been playing, I don't think he was going to turn it around immediately, right? Like, this is a team that is, 7 points out of a playoff spot. I guess they're 5 points out of a playoff spot, looking at wild card 2 with a game in hand. They're pushing. They want these games are important to Calgary, right? They want to catch up. They want to get in the mix. So he's not really the guy in those scenarios.
Speaking of not seeing guys, what do you think of Lindholm's play so far?
I think he's been a little slow to adapt. I'm tentative to get too nervous, too concerned, because I think he's a good enough and a smart enough player to figure it out. But it has been, since he joined the team during the All-Star break, they haven't really had many practices, right? They've been playing every other day since then until this 2-day gap. So the practice might help. When he's been on, he's been pretty good. I think he's made a lot of quiet plays that have looked okay, but you want him to produce, right? For what we paid for him. Has he been better than Kuzmenko this year? Yes. And he definitely adds a lot, especially in the face-off dot. But of course I'd love to see more. And I'm hoping that's the benefit of making that trade early, right? That he can get settled in over the next 10 games and then really dial it up in April.
Good point. Jackass, if you think, if we win the cup, is it the greatest turnaround in the history of sport? I'm sure there's been a lot of rags to riches stories, but because of where we are, location bias. Yes, of course, this is the greatest, but I'm sure there's others that are even more impressive than this.
Yeah, it depends on the time scale, right? I mean,
Yeah.
28-3, New England Atlanta Super Bowl was a heck of a turnaround and pretty quick. But obviously that's a bit of a different time scale.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a flip though for not making a lot of roster moves. I mean, a lot of like good depth moves, but yeah, that's a big coaching upgrade.
Yeah. Shannon, welcome to membership. Thank you. You're always in the chat, and thank you for your support as well. How about this? Nashville in the first round. Money Puck seems to have it as the most likely opponent.
And it makes sense if you look at the standings, right? I mean, as of right now, and I'll pull up the Athletics odds. Right now, they have the Canucks at a 73% chance to win the division. And I wonder if that's changed. Was there any games tonight? Did Edmonton
won?
Edmonton won. Dallas lost, which helps as well. So right now they have them at most likely to win the division. And if they win the division, they probably also win the conference. Either that or they come second, right? Yep. So they're going to be in P1, which means they will play one of the two wildcard teams.
Yep.
And if you look at the wildcard teams, it is right now it's the Kings and the Predators, and there's not really anyone that close behind them, right? Like the Kings have a 7-point lead on Calgary, and the Preds have a 4-point lead on St. Louis and Minnesota. So it's probably going to be Nashville and one of like Edmonton or LA or even Vegas in that wild card spot, in those two wild card spots. So Nashville will probably be the lowest of those. And so if the Canucks win the division, they'll play them. And if they get second in the conference, there's like 3 teams they could play. So that's probably why Nashville's the most likely.
Yeah.
I'd be fine with playing Nashville in the first round. They have a goalie that can get hot, but not a ton else really.
Yep. They got a good keyboard player at their arena, but I think St. Louis is a scarier team to me. For some reason, and we both talk about how we hate St. Louis goaltenders, but we don't match up well against them for some reason, at least this season. So I will happily take Nashville as a wild card 2 opponent. Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a good push from Nashville here, right? They lost 9-2 to the Stars like a week and a half ago, and then they've won 5 straight. Right. Although St. Louis, San Jose, and Anaheim were 3 of those teams, but they did beat LA and Vegas, which was nice for us. But yeah, I mean, look, they're a team that, could get hot, but I would think the Canucks would be pretty heavy favorites if that was the first round matchup.
Sure. Cody, thank you for the reminder. We will end our show with our 3-game prediction for the first next week, but we'll get to that. Thank you, Cody.
Let's take one more question or two before we do that.
All right, let's do it.
If you have any that you see there.
I'll address this real quick. Justin, we actually talked about this extensively just before you got on here. Parker and I both, whether it's a side or not, we're both on the thinking of Pettersson said he'll wait to the end of the season. So we believe that's what's going to happen. And then everything else falls out from there.
Mm-hmm. All right. I don't know if there's anyone else that we want to jump to, or if we should just go to our predictions, because it is 10:58.
All right, last one. I won't put it up there. What's the penalty for getting a guy offer sheet and taken away? It depends on salary, right?
Yeah,
and it's either 5 firsts or 4 firsts, basically.
It's 4 firsts at the top level, which is what Pettersson would assuredly be under.
Right.
So it would be 4 first-round picks.
Right. I think Roberto Luongo asked that earlier. Not the real Roberto Luongo, but yeah.
So if it's and no really bad team is probably going to do that, because that's a lot of compensation for a bad team, because that's probably 4 lottery picks, or maybe at least 2 or 3. So that'd be a bit tough.
Yeah. Great point. And Shiraz, you just got here. Love the avatar. Say hi to my favorite Canucks duo on YouTube. Well, welcome. Come an hour earlier next time.
And before we preview the game, I'll do my shout of, if you missed any part of the show, you can rewind back to the beginning, and it'll be on your favorite podcast platform in 10 to 15 minutes. So make sure to subscribe on there Parker. And on here, and hit the like button. As we preview the 3 games coming up, a couple of gaps. We got tomorrow against Pittsburgh. We have Thursday against LA, and then another 2-day break, and the Canucks play Sunday. No Saturday game this week. Going Sunday, getting their 2-day break on the previous end of the Monday. instead of afterwards. So Canucks Penguins, Canucks Kings, and then they go on the road to Anaheim to face the Ducks. Penguins, as of right now, struggling. I mean, like pretty struggling. Only 3 points out of a playoff spot with 2 games in hand, or maybe. The Lightning are in there too. There's going to be 5 out of the Atlantic potentially.
Right. Yes.
So they're 9 points out, but they have 5 games in hand on Tampa Bay. Don't know how that happens. They've played the least games of anyone in the NHL. So they could make a push, but they've been struggling.
And then LA, they just lost to Edmonton tonight, and they are fighting with Edmonton, right, for third place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had that big fall, and then they've brought it back recently. Won 7 of their last 10, and that includes their loss tonight. With a 4-0 win over the Oilers, and then losing 7-0 3 nights later to the Sabres, which is hilarious. But they had won. They've been doing well lately. They beat the Devils, they beat the Bruins, they beat the Penguins. They beat the Ducks and lost to the Oilers. So they've been good. That'll be a tougher one. And then the Ducks should be some light work.
Okay, what the heck? Sorry.
The Ducks have just over half of the points of the Canucks this season.
Okay.
They have 43. I didn't know that you could go that low. And they've just been bad. They've been bad. They've lost 3 straight. They lost 7-4 to Columbus. That's tough. That one should be a pretty easy win to kick off the California trip.
Well, you know what? We were coming off a 4-game losing streak. We have 1 win already. I'm agreeing with Angelo and Sir Wojenheim. I'm not even sure what that means. I'm going 3 straight wins, 3 more wins. So I'm going 3-0 this week for the Canucks. I have not predicted an undefeated week, so I'm going 3-0.
I like it. I think they got a real shot at it. I mean, they're going to be favorites against the Penguins, and maybe I'll see what the actual numbers are because I can pull that up super quick. They are going to be, of course, the page doesn't load when I say that. Perfect. They are, pretty heavy favorites against Pittsburgh in the game tomorrow. And then they'll probably be favorites against LA because it's at home, and they'll probably be road favorites against the Ducks. They're going to be favored to win all 3. I'll go a little pessimistic, and I'll go 2-0-1 for a little 5-point week. And they'll just keep building that lead on first place in the NHL.
Yeah, I love it. I know we got rocked in our. Didn't we both predict winning records for it doesn't matter. Last week.
I don't think we've predicted a losing record since the first few games of the season.
That's true. Why would we? All right. So we got a 3-0, a 2-0-1. Basically, Parker and I are saying that they're going to rock the next 3 games until we see you guys next.
Excellent. All right, folks. Thank you all very much for joining. Like I just said, if you missed any part of the show, you can rewind back to the beginning here on YouTube. You can find it on your favorite podcast platform in a matter of 10, 15 minutes. Make sure you subscribe while you're here and hit the like button. It helps us out. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for being active in the chat. As always, we'll be back next week, next Monday, which will be March the 4th, same time, same place. Make sure you're subscribed, hit the notifications. Clay, any parting words this Monday night?
Well, great seeing you, Parker. Great being with you. Great to be back after that Seattle debacle, but back on track with the Boston win, and looking forward to reconvening in a week and talking about three massive wins for us. And if you're not sick of, don't worry. If you want to jump on my stream in 10 minutes, no PD talk. I can't promise that.
Yeah, folks, if your night's not done yet, which mine is, unfortunately,
yes.
Jump on over to Canuck Clay on YouTube. He'll be doing a stream in about 10 minutes. You can find me on YouTube and Twitter, ParkersPucks. You can find Clay on the same at Canuck Clay. Have a good night, everybody, and we will see you next week.